The first panel discussion of this morning is talking about the state of the union on blockchain. We're not talking about cryptocurrency and bitcoins, etc. It's the adoption of the technology in the financial service industry. And I'm really have the honor and the pleasure to have really respective leaders in that field, from Joe Lubin, the CEO of Consensys, Richard Caetano, the CEO of Stratumn, and Thierry Bedoin, the Chief Digital Officer of the Banque of France, here on stage. And before we go on to the question, I would like to ask Joe to introduce yourself a little bit, what you do, and also especially what you do in the blockchain financial service area.
The only thing I do is in the blockchain area. So my name is Joseph Lubin, background about 10 years in robotics, machine vision, AI, followed by lots of software engineering. Worked at Goldman Sachs for a little while, transitioned to the world of finance, where I ended up building some trading systems and ran a hedge fund with a partner. Put me in a position where I became aware of the Bitcoin space very early, and it was an immature space, so I didn't want to build a company in the space. But when I encountered a white paper describing the Ethereum platform written by Vitalik Buterin, which described a scalable way of building any sort of application, not just a money application, but any app in any industry on this new trustful platform, I jumped in fully, jumped onto the Ethereum project, built it out. 1 year later, when we were close to releasing version 1 of the Ethereum client and protocol, I started our company Consensys. Consensys has been running for 3 years. We're 615 people in 28 countries. We build infrastructure for the Ethereum ecosystem and other decentralizing technologies. We build core applications at the application layer, and we build platforms at the application layer. We do enterprise and government consulting. We have an academy where we've trained many software engineers and other kinds of learners, and we do some capital markets activities.
Thank you, Joe. And Richard?
Yeah, hi, my name is Richard Cattano, and I'm a 20-year veteran from the enterprise space and worked with startups between New York and San Francisco and in Paris. I had my Bitcoin moment in early 2011 and saw the white paper and decided to focus on that technology, similar to you with Ethereum. Yeah, and so I was working with Paymium early on as head of product, and I left in 2013-14 to go work on what became proof of process. So proof of process is a technology and a protocol that Stratumn has developed that, in simple words, it allows you to secure a flowchart on a blockchain. So if you compare to different types of blockchains we see today, we have the transaction ledgers that you typically see with cryptocurrencies and things like that, and then you have the Ethereum virtual machine or the world computer. And then Stratum's focused on developing this process-oriented blockchain technology. So we're multiple parties who may be involved in a business deal could literally drag and drop and map out a process that they would share and prove to each other that they've completed the steps, and then that would be secured in a type of blockchain. So we focus mostly on enterprise infrastructure and applying that in various industries, specifically insurance, supply chains, and finance.
Thank you, Richard. Thierry?
Yes, so I'm Thierry Bedoin. I am the CDO of Banque de France. So as my governor said yesterday, I think that Banque de France is the only central bank having a CDO, a Chief Digital Officer. So my role is, of course, to transform Banque de France in a digital actor. And of course, we are very interested in blockchain. In blockchain because blockchain allows us to re-engineer our processes. And we have a lot of actors in our ecosystem, and of course, blockchain for us is present a great value. So we are part of the early movers. In your slide, you say early movers. Banque de France is one of the early movers for blockchain because we launched at the end of last year in December, since December, a real blockchain in production for communication and sharing information with the commercial banks in France.
Very good. So let me start the discussion about about exactly as Terry you mentioned is early mover moving into production, because at the end the industry is getting measured by impact, how much leveraging blockchain as a state-of-the-art technology to change businesses, drive more efficiency or growth out of that. So let me start with Joe. Joe, your company, Consensys, is involved in a lot of projects over last year in the financial service area, banking, insurance, etc. What do you think is the most promising use case? I try to touch really high level 4 or 5 of that. Do you think that we'll see in production this year, or maybe with even bigger impact the next year, the following year?
So many. That's a difficult one to prioritize. So we're seeing Gold 2.0 in the Bitcoin space. We're seeing token launches, whether they're tokenized securities or utility tokens. We prefer to stay away from the term ICO for utility tokens because in our discussions with regulators around the world, if you're giving people the impression that there's an investment there rather than a utility token, a consumption token or a membership token, then that presents it as an investment, and that could be seen as a security. Asset-backed tokens.
But Joe, this is, if I may ask you, is those are not the traditional banks then, no?
Sorry?
This discussion is less with traditional banks, I would say. Is that fair to say?
For
more and more
with
folks that moving out of banks see a huge opportunity. Is that a fair statement? Because I think I see two groups. One is really radical embracing a business model change, as you mentioned, with asset-based tokens and utility tokens, and more.
But there's a spectrum.
The spectrum then.
Yeah, and as we spoke about yesterday, there are lots of traditional companies moving into this space and issuing different kinds of tokens. We do a lot of that work. So other applications, we're seeing decentralized protocols for atomic swaps, asset-backed tokens. 2 exciting projects that we're about to release very soon are a decentralized platform for professional journalism, and we're hooking up with some very significant journalism outfits around the world, and tokenized real estate, so fractional ownership of real estate.
Okay. Richard, especially from an insurance perspective, there's a lot going on there,
we've done. So we're very focused on the process security, automation and traceability space, or if you want to call it a space. And what we've seen, so our short story is in 2016 we launched about a dozen or so projects with different companies. We found that insurance was pretty hot. So moving into 2017, we did a lot of work with legal. And with other kinds of consulting firms to really look at the implications of the technology. We posted some articles about that in the press. And then by the end of 2017, we were actually able to go live with our stack. And so 2017 was a year of really doing a lot of research, really finding out what are the corners that need to be rounded off to get into production. And now with that behind us, we see 2018 as just being a really a busy year of just going to work and deploying systems.
Okay. Terry, your bank, the central bank, has interaction with a lot of banks. Besides your first mover case, what else do you see for yourself and also maybe for the French banking system?
Yeah, so of course, so we have one use case, and maybe I will tell you a bit more, but it's a very narrow use case. But what we can see is there is a great interest in the blockchain and in the financial sector. Of course, in your introduction, you told a little bit about the trade finance, for instance, is really a real use case, and the blockchain could be a real benefit for the process. But I would like also to mention another use case, which is unlisted assets, unlisted bonds. Okay. Because you can see, especially in France, I think because there is a regulation that has been given by the Ministry of Finance to allow actors to issue and exchange bonds, unlisted bonds. And there are some initiatives with some banks, in particular BNPP with the Smart Angels, in association with Smart Angels, building an infrastructure to exchange and issue unlisted bonds. So it could be also a use case that can go in production quite rapidly. So quite interesting.
What you're saying is also besides the discussed use cases, the asset management industry could be the next battlefield that, first of all, the crypto as an asset class will emerge, but assets that are not tradable right now are moving to the ledger.
And that is really interesting that for the first movers, you can see that the use cases are not fully governed a real process running now.
Yeah.
What you see that maybe non-really automized process could be the first use cases.
Yeah.
And for unlisted bonds, it's really the case. So to start with, the better is to start with not fighting with a strong existing governance, but to push ahead new use cases, maybe with lighter governance. And the blockchain maybe help having a strong process without any strong governance, and that is the value of a blockchain.
So what you're saying is there's a maybe higher probability of success in cases that are not in focus in the past, very fragmented, less digital, and maybe also new ecosystems building up.
And new business.
And that's the other topic. But at the end, the willingness of competitors to work on those topics is higher than in a very competitive market environment, like the payment environment, etc.